in this video, I'm going to redo what I did in class to show you how to put your post-it note patterns into repeat and also how to put the texture into repeat. So in advance, I've already put some of the other textures into repeat so that you can see them. And you'll notice if you look at the rulers that everything's really big because when you photograph things, sometimes the scale is much bigger than real life. So for each of these textures, I'm definitely not going to use it at 40 inches wide. So before I use them, I'm going to shrink them down. I've already saved them. So I recommend if you're taking photos that you do the same thing. So starting here with Joe's post-it note patterns, I know I'm asking you to do the straight repeats, but because we did the bottom one in class yesterday, I'm going to do that again. First, I'm going to crop, and you can follow my cursor if you're not comfortable using Photoshop. I'm going to crop, so I just have the bottom one, and hit enter on my keyboard. Then I'm going to rotate it just so that it's oriented the right way. So image, rotation, 90 degrees counterclockwise. So now it's going the way I want it to. You'll notice that it is not straight. The photo is not straight. So I'm going to go to the eyedropper tool and down to the ruler tool. I'm going to zoom in so you can see this a little bit better. And I'm going to actually use the ruler tool to draw a straight line on something that should be straight and square. So this is a good trick for straightening out artwork if you have something to guide you. So I drew a line, and then I'm going to go to image, rotation, arbitrary. That number is the angle that I need to rotate it to correct it. So I can just say, okay, and you'll see that it squared it off. You can thank me later for that tool. So now I'm going to just crop it again to get rid of all that excess information. So you'll notice that I'm not using the crop tool, I'm just using the marquee tool here to do it. I can also use the crop tool. So I've drawn the area I want to keep, image, crop. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is adjust the black and white so that it's not gray and white or gray and black. So I'm going to say image, adjust, threshold, and you're going to notice that there's actually a lot of shadowing here. That comes from photographing in weird lighting. So if this happens to you and you can't adjust it using the sliders, I recommend that you take a new picture or scan. So you'll see if I move this over, I keep the black lines, but I lose the shading. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm going to click OK. So I still have a selection on which I don't need, so I'm going to deselect that. I'm not using any keyboard shortcuts just so you can see it, but if you ever want to use keyboard shortcuts, you'll notice that they're next to a lot of the commands in the drop-down menu. Okay, so I've adjusted that. Probably would make sense for me to save it right now so I don't lose any work if I crash, but I'm going to live on the edge and keep going. So select all. New layer via cut. And what that does is it puts it on its own layer without me having to copy and paste. You'll see in the layers menu that it's on its own layer. Now I'm going to make the canvas size 200% vertically. So I always start with the vertical, and you'll notice that I moved the artwork to the top section here. So it only added space to the bottom. Now I'm going to use the move tool, and I'm actually going to hold down my keyboard, the option key on a Mac, and it gives me a double arrow. That's a quick way of me duplicating. Again, I don't have to copy and paste. Next, I'm going to line it up with the left-hand side. You'll notice that it's snapping into position so that it's perfectly lined up. That's really important because if it's not lined up perfectly, then my repeat won't be perfect. And using that as a guide on the left-hand side, that snap, I'm going to move this into position. You can see how it looks like it's going to line up pretty well. You have to make a couple adjustments, but using the arrow keys on the keyboard, I'm also doing that. Now I'm going to use the lasso tool to get rid of the stuff that I don't need. So I'm selecting it and hitting delete on the keyboard. I'm undoing my selection with well, you can see it's Command D on my keyboard. The other thing I can do here is I can use the eraser. So I want to suggest that you use the right tool depending on your artwork. The eraser is going to make more sense for some textures, the lasso for some of your post-it note patterns. With the eraser, you want to look at the quality of the eraser as you're working. So up here, there's some controls. If I use no hardness on the eraser, it's going to give me a really fuzzy line, fuzzy erasing line, and that can sometimes disrupt the artwork. So I like to adjust that based on what it looks like. In this case, it's not that big of a deal, but a hard edge would give me a kind of more graphic erasure, and I wouldn't have to worry about all those tones. You'll notice that things are not lining up perfectly. In class, the same thing happened, and what I did is I drew in some of the areas that weren't lining up properly. So here, I'm going to go as much as I can. The other thing I did in class is I went to the layers menu and I made the top layer less opaque so I could see what was happening as I was erasing it. And you'll notice here that you probably can hear my neighbor in the backyard calling for her dog in the most annoying voice possible. So I'm just gonna keep going and hope that you're not hearing her over my voice. This looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm happy with this. Now, if I wasn't happy with it and I needed to draw something in, I would literally just go to the lasso tool, make sure I'm drawing with black or white, depending on what I'm doing, and like fix an area like that, edit, fill, and that's gonna fill with the foreground color. You know, or if I don't like using the lasso tool, I could go down to the pencil tool, change the size of it, and go in and draw with that. You can see I don't actually want to draw with that, but I'm just showing you how it works. All right, so I'm pretty happy with the way this looks. These two layers, the artwork layers, need to be merged together. So layer, merge down. And if I don't merge them together, I'm going to end up in trouble. So you want to do that. Now I'm going to bring down the guide from the ruler area. If your ruler's not on, you can go to, window and make sure the ruler is on. Or you can do Command R on your keyboard to toggle the ruler on and off. So I've brought this down and I'm going to select the upper left-hand corner so that I know exactly where my starting point is. I'm going to do new layer via copy so that I have this like floating selection. I'll call it the floating selection. You don't have to rename it. I'm just doing it so that you know what I'm talking about. And then this would be the artwork layer. Okay. So I'm going to move the floating selection down until it finds itself again in the repeat. So you can see right here that it is the exact same spot. If you're not sure, you can turn it on and off. It looks like I'm a little bit off. Let's see how it lines up. Okay. And then you would put a guide down at the top so that you know the beginning and the end. A lot of times people mistakenly put the guide at the bottom and they end up not cropping the repeat. They add something to it, so make sure you put it at the top. This is already an 8-minute video. Sorry about that. I'm going to probably end this video and then do the texture one so you can watch them back to back. Okay, so I'm going to take that, image, image, crop with the marquee tool, or you can use a crop tool. Now I'm going to do the sideways. Canvas size, move the artwork to the left, make this 200%. I'm going to zoom out so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to use the move tool, option on my keyboard to duplicate this, and then put that into position. Here, I could do it here, basically the same thing. I'll go here. And then I'm going to erase this away. I can always use the arrows on the keyboard to scooch it into better position. I'm going to use the eraser here and here. Looks great. the Post-it note repeat is really close, so this made it easier. I'm going to merge the artwork layers, layer, merge down. I'm going to bring over my floating selection by selecting from the guideline. So I started a quarter of the way in so that I make sure I grab the part that was fixed. New layer via copy. I'm going to move this over. Zoom in so I can see where it's in. I'm just using the arrows on the keyboard to line this up. You can see it's there. I'm going to take the artwork layer off and put my guide. All right, throw out the floating selection. And now I can select this area and crop it. Image, crop. Now, having this one unit allows me to select all and define it as a pattern. So this pattern, I'm going to go Joe's, we'll call it Joe's Arches, is going to stay on my computer so I can use it whenever I want. But what I want to do probably to see the actual repeat is I'm going to deselect and remove the guides, clear guides. And I'm going to make the canvas size like, I could do it by percentages. That's sometimes helpful. I can say I want it to be 300% by 500%. Let's make it that big. And I'm going to select all and fill with pattern. Make sure I select the right pattern. And there we go. It looks like I didn't clear the guides properly, so I'm just going to do that again. I locked them by accident. And you can see that there was a little problem in my cropping before, so there's a problem here. It's always good to find that before you work with a file and fix it in the original unit. For the purpose of this video, I'm not going to go back to the original unit to fix it, but that's what I would do normally. And this is a pretty good repeat now. Some areas that I might want to tweak because I did bad erasing, but you can then save the file. So I'm going to end this repeat file. I'm going to start a new one that's for the texture, and then I'm going to bring them together in a third video.